The Witch of Izalith and her daughters of chaos.
I am the god of hellfire, and I bring you fire! I'll take you to burn. Fire. I'll take you to learn.
Ihawa Akarja, and welcome to my channel, The Serpentine Herald, where I will aim to explore the real-world inspirations behind some of our favourite video games, and this will often be filtered through the language, folklore, and stories that I myself grew up with. Since this is my first video, I want to give a little background about myself. I chose the name Serpentine Herald because, as you may have guessed, I am from Ireland. I love the Emerald Herald. She's probably the most famous soul character voiced by an Irish person, and like the Emerald Herald, I want to give you tidbits to think upon, little nuggets of lore. Serpentine is also another type of green stone, and often called a cheaper cousin to emerald, so I thought that was fitting. Today I'm starting what's hopefully going to be an ongoing series called In Anam on Nahar, the Etymology of Souls. We're going to start with the Witch of Izalith and some special guests. I chose this as my first video because I only discovered this myself during the week and I got so excited. I wanted to share it with everyone. I was excited enough to set up a YouTube channel. In this video, I want to put forward some theories on what the Witch of Izalith's original name could have been and where the names of her daughters Caoránach and Caoilg come from. We all know From Software likes to use Celtic names in their games. In Dark Souls 1 alone, we have Gwyn, Gwyndolin, Guinevere, and Lloyd, which are all Welsh names. Then we have in Donal of Xena, Ciarán and Goff, or Gow, depending on where you come from. All pretty common Irish names, with Goff mainly being used as a last name in real life. But through the FromSoft catalogue, there have been some names that are just a bit, for lack of a better word, weird. And I think that some of these maybe originated as uncommon or archaic words, kind of like the shadow tree. These old words may have gotten a little mixed up in the translation from their language into Japanese and then into English for the localization.
Look how they mess with my book.
I was inspired by the famous LoKeyLore and channel Yoshimitsu, who both look at original Japanese text in the FromSoft games to see if we're missing anything in translation. Now, by and large, the localization of these games are excellent, except maybe the OG Demon Souls, but the past is a different country, as they say. But there are some things that the team wouldn't be expected to know, maybe until all 3 games were out in the Dark Souls series, for instance, or very specific ancient concepts from different cultures. You can see this in the location Thurland from Dark Souls 1, the city that Rhea and Petrus come from. Thurland and Anor Londo actually sound very similar in the Japanese katakana. This has led some fans to speculate that Thurland was originally intended to be Sol Londo, the triplet city to Anor Londo and New Londo. So I started thinking about this back and forth of translation when I was reading about the Alapeshtana. Alapeshtana are the mythical worm beasts of ancient Ireland. Alapesht translates into Great Beast, or, my favourite interpretation, Fabulous Monster. A famous Alapesht, dare I say the most famous, is often referred to as the mother of all demons. Her name is Caoránach, sometimes Caoránach, or just Quail. Her name means roughly full of fire, more literally a round, glowing orb of fire that is about to burst. Quair is a word or a prefix which means a lot of things in Irish. Most very old concepts in Irish do. It can mean a berry, a drop of molten metal, a flame, a ball, anything roughly round depending on the context. Caoránach is called the mother of all demons in English, but the Irish word used was Peshtina. While today that usually means your bog standard, basic, everyday, beige specky earthworms, in mythological terms it covers a lot of ground. Things like sandworms, sea serpents, and any sort of dragon or serpent living in lakes, rivers, or wells. The small ones were called Peshtina. The big ones, Alapeshtina. Nessie the Loch Ness Monster is a great example of an Alapesht in popular culture that you might already know about. Alapeshts were considered impressive or fabulous because they were considered extremely ancient. I even saw them described as primordial serpents, in fact. They were considered very wise, but also very dangerous by the ancient people of Ireland. Every year, it was said Caoránach would give birth to hundreds of demons that would spread through the waterways of Ireland.
Look at all that cute demon babies!
She herself came from very humble beginnings, being born as a tiny, minuscule, hairy worm found within the leg bone of an evil witch known as the Finger Hag or Ancailleach. Ancailleach will be the subject of another video more tied into Elden Ring, but for now you can imagine Cailleachs as a sort of hag species, almost like in D&D. From these auspicious beginnings, Caoránach grew and grew over time to monstrous proportions in her deep underwater cave, spewing out hundreds of demons every single year, before she was slain by the brave warrior Conan, or in some later Christian tales, by St. Patrick. Loch Derg in Ireland takes its name from this story. This was said to be her home, and that the bedrock of the lake and all of the surrounding rocks were dyed bright red by Caoránach's blood, the mighty beast leaving one final eternal mark on the land, the Red Lake. Okay, you might be asking, great, what does this have to do with Dark Souls? This is the story that got me thinking. As I said Caoránach's name out loud, I realised it sounded very much like Caolána. It isn't spelled like Caolána, so it took me a minute. And then I started thinking, what if the gods in Dark Souls followed the same naming conventions as Gwyn and the gods in Elden Ring? How the gods and demigods name their children in both cases is they use the same prefix or the same first letter or first sound of their name and create the children's names from that. For instance, Godfrey, Godwin, and down their line, Godric, and the palette swap guy Godefroy. Vic's God here is pretty obvious. It means God, or good. Renala has a sister called R'hllana. Her daughter is Rani, and it's a matrilineal monarchy. That is to say, power is passed down through mothers to their daughters. Ray or Ri as a prefix means royal in several languages. These women's names were likely inspired by Celtic roots that informed their Welsh accents in the localization. Specifically, the names Rhianna, or Riona, meaning queen in Irish, Rhiannon, which is the Welsh version of this name, and the Irish term in general for queen, Bonrian. I think George R. R. Martin tends to favour scrambling some letters around. Let's take a closer look at probably the best example, the blueprint, the prototype himself, Gwyn. In Dark Souls 1, Gwyn's named children are Guinevere and Gwyndolin. The Nameless King was stricken from history, quite shamelessly so. Then in Dark Souls 3, in comes Filianore. Now, at first, this might not seem like a good fit for the other names, right? Well, Filianore actually just means daughter of sunlight or daughter of Gwyn in Latin. I believe it's more of a title. You can also see Anor, like Anor Londo, in her name, which could be interpreted as loved by the sun. Let's translate the word Filianore directly into Welsh. You'd get something like Gwyneth. Gwyneth and its older form Gwynedd is a common Welsh name. Like any Welsh name with the Gwyn prefix, it has the meaning of pure and blessed. But Gwynedd also originates from the kingdom of Gwynedd and can refer to the land or the Celtic tribe that lived in this kingdom. That is why sometimes on etymology websites you see Gwynedd translated as a band of warriors. So, Gwynedd here could mean from the land of Gwyn, or be a reference to the pygmy band of warriors that she was a gift to. Now, this leads us to the Nameless King, the man of the hour himself, one of the most popular enduring mysteries in the Soul series. Recently, user Pointless Productions shared that our Nameless King may be nameless no more and have been recently name-dropped, super casually in Night Rain. Just casually slipped on in there. A war god called Grin is mentioned. Now, while this might refer to some completely unrelated god, here's why I think the claim that this could be talking about the Nameless King has some legs. At first glance, it looks like a localization maybe to differentiate this name from Gwyn, but linguistically, it's an anglicized version of Grian, the Irish word for sun. In their Proto-Indo-European roots, both Gwyn and Grian stem from the same origin point. So the Nameless King would be essentially Gwyn Jr., but also literally the embodiment of the sun, which makes perfect sense when you remember the Warriors of Sunlight are devoted to him. In Irish, the Warriors of Sunlight would be called Ridri na Graine, the Warriors of Sunlight, or Grian's Knights. Their motto, Praise the Sun, would be Mulla don Grian, praise to the sun or praise be to Grian. A lot of people thought the Nameless King was called Faram back in Dark Souls 2, and I have an answer for this part too. Interestingly, in Old and Middle Irish, Faram means alongside or as good as. This indicates that if the root is from Irish, Grin was considered allied to or equal to someone historically significant. So this might have been an epithet, a title, like many pagan gods had. Think Hermes Trismegistus, or Hermes the Thrice Great in Greek mythology. And I mean, what is a Souls boss without a title? So the full title, before he was stripped of his name, could have been something like Grian Faram an Leo. Grian, ally of the lion, which is fun because it could refer to either the Ferosan Lion Knights or to Nameless's bestie himself, Ornstein, owner of the Leo Ring, named after composer Leo Ornstein. Now we're chugging diesel. Sorry, that means things are going well. With this in mind, Gwyn's family tree might look a bit like this. We have Gwyn, the father, Grian, Gwyn Jr. / the son, and Guinevere, the Holy Ghost, literally. And also Gwyneth, and then Gwyndolin are there too. If you're not sold on this whole title and name blending together, the series actually has examples outside of Gwyn's family tree. Here's an example with clearer roots in the text just to illustrate my point a bit more. We're going to look at two Olapests that we all know, Kaathe and Frampt. Darkstalker Kaathe is rendered in Japanese as Yaminade no Kasu. Kasu is not usually translated as Kath, as in Catherine. Kasu is usually translated as Kas. Kasu caresses the darkness, in the literal translation. In the real world, the name Kas is usually short for Cassandra, but I doubt that's where Kaathe's name originated, unless we've all been just misgendering Kaathe for ages. Sorry, Kaathe. However, what I think is more likely, Kas is an old Irish word, meaning twisted, winding, or devious. We'll put that beside Frampt's name, which pretty directly comes from Old Norse, Frampt, no P, meaning forward or bold, and it's tied to the verb frama, meaning to promote or to give fame to someone. So Kaathe's title in Irish would be something like Cas Mangli an Dorcadish, Cas the Dark Caresser, or Mangli Casta an Dorcadish, the twisted one who caresses the darkness. For Frampt in Old Norse, you would get something like Frampt Königslittari, King Seeker Frampt, or the compound word Fram Königsleitandi, the bold promoter of kings. Incidentally, when I was looking up the word Frampt, it gives the general vibe of pushy, and I thought that was really funny. So both of these names work like Grian. Their epithet is reflected in their name, and it can also be integrated seamlessly into their boss title. I mean that your options for endings in Dark Souls 1 are to either go with pushy or twisted. And I think that's beautiful. Now that you've all come with me on my little linguistic journey, let's look back again at the mother of all Alapests, Eglish. No, the Witch of Izalith and her Daughters of Chaos. I propose that the Witch of Izalith may have originally been called Caoránach, Mother of Demons, or something based on this concept, with the prefix of queer. When bringing foreign names into Japanese, it's typically done through the language of katakana, spelled out phonetically, or as close as Japanese phonemes allow. For instance, Japanese has one character that represents something between our concept of the letter or and the letter L, and be translated back into something like English or Irish with either letter. Languages with complex consonants and glottal stops get rounded out with vowels in between. So something like Caoránach becomes Caoránach. In Japanese, Caoránach is rendered as Kurana and Caolag as Kuragu. These both use elongated A sounds, which is this symbol in Japanese. Caoránach also has the Irish version of this, which is called a fada, meaning long. So that kind of strengthens the idea that these might be translated from a linked concept. This leads me to propose a family tree like Caoránach or Quail, the mother, then Caolána, spelled like on screen, and Caolag, spelled like it's on screen here. The reason I chose this spelling was because Caorag is a real Irish word, and it means little berry or little flame. Very literally, it would be young glowing sphere, which is a pretty apt name for Caolag's glowing spider body, if a little bit on the nose for my liking. It's also very notable that in Irish family naming, a child named after their parent often gets called Og at the end of their name, which means little or young. It's kind of like junior. Real life example. The father is Sean, the son is Seanóg. So if the mother is Caoránach, or Quail for short, a daughter could easily be called Caolag. And now we come to the really fun bit. When I first saw Caoránach, I knew that it wasn't a used Irish name in everyday life, but I did know there was something very close to it. Cuillin. Abroad you might hear this as Keelan with a K. It means slender and fair, often referring to Saint Cuillin, who was described as a pious lady who quickly won the esteem and affection of her sister nuns by her exactness to every duty, and also by her sweet temper, gentle, confiding disposition, and unaffected piety. Who does this passage remind you of?
Caolag, my dear sister, don't worry for me. I care only to assist you. Caolag.
Yes, it's the fair lady, aka Caolag's sister. Fair here means both beautiful and white in colour in Irish as it does in English. And this really fits her depiction in the game and even her colorization in the game. So, the names could flow like this. Caoránach, the mother. Caolána, the eldest daughter. Caolag, maybe somewhere in the middle. And Cuillin. The titles she uses in Japanese suggest that she is the youngest sister. quick sidebar, this root name could potentially be the same used for Quella in Dark Souls 2, especially indicating that he was a small in stature or sickly god, and the timid boy that's referenced in the item description. But that name exists purely in the localization, as does Kaathe, the goddess of tears, because his Japanese name is Nera, which is probably from the Italian nero, meaning black. I think this might have been referencing something like the Roman god of night, Nyx, and the darkness of night for the god of dreams. Maybe. There are more implied daughters of chaos that we never meet and never know the names of, but there's the potential of more names that follow this naming convention. I thought, just as a fun illustration, not a daughter, but we do have ceaseless discharge. The character. If you have ceaseless discharge in real life, please see a doctor right now. Like, stop the video. In Japanese, ceaseless discharge's name is roughly translated as the creature that continually is in pain or festering. Tadare Tutsukaru Mono. If I were translating the game into Irish, I would translate this as Filianore, the one who weeps, referring to both his wounds and the ceaseless discharge thereof, and because he seems to be wailing and mourning that you've disturbed what he believes to be Caolána's dead body. Cuina is the word for keening, which is an old Irish funerary practice. Filianores were practitioners of the art of keening. They were people who'd be hired for funerals to cry, to scream and sing, to get this really intense atmosphere, and it's believed that's where the folklore figure the Banshee came from. Charge's boss fight is underscored by this constant deep, low cry. At least that's what I interpreted the sound as. So, Filianore, the one who weeps eternally, I don't know, it just feels nice. It's nicer than ceaseless discharge as a name, but that isn't hard. But it fits the family structure, it describes him, and it's just quite like the common Irish name for boys, Connor. So, Akarja, have I cracked the code? Have I named the Nameless and found the root of how to name the souls? Let me know your thoughts and theories in the comments. I absolutely want to hear whatever you have to say. So, from the Serpentine Herald, Slán go Fóill, Mulla Dungreen, and as always,
Join myself and King as remedy. Together we will devour the very gods.